This Fleet Equipment Unscripted interview is presented by Hendrickson, a leading manufacturer of heavy-duty suspension systems and components to the global commercial transportation industry. Visit hendrickson-intl.com to learn more.
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Morgan, Content Director for Fleet Equipment, and welcome to Fleet Equipment Unscripted. Today we're talking with Preeti Subramanian, Senior Product Manager for Trucks, Thermo King and Trane Technologies. Preeti, great to see you. Thanks for taking the time.
No problem. My pleasure, Jason.
So I'm excited to talk with you because we're going to talk about zero emissions technologies, lower emissions technologies as it's related to APUs and refrigeration units. And I feel like there's been a lot of work done in the past, let's say 12 to 16 months on both the truck body side and the trailer side. But to kind of lay some groundwork here, can you just give us an idea from your point of view of where are we at with lower and zero emissions technologies in both APU and reefer unit segments?
So I'll start with class 5 to 7 trucks because that's my space, and I have a product coming up very shortly to serve that space. So in that space, it's zero emissions, where we are not adding to the tailpipe emissions by the operation of our reefer units to the truck tailpipes, right? So that's the innovation piece. We started with a ground up design to make sure the efficiency is at the core of what we do. And to get that highest efficiency, we are taking a high voltage connection directly from the chassis batteries. So it needs a battery electric truck to run. And it is a single temp unit at launch. And it is sized to the largest diesel offering we have today in the diesel world. So it also has a variable speed compressor that can vary the speed. It's no longer belt-driven speed, so the capacity and hence the cold air that blows into the box can be controlled to whatever capacity you want.
Okay, so this is, you're getting the power from the chassis battery, right? There's not a separate battery in this class 5 to 7 world. There's not a separate battery on the refrigeration unit that I have to plug in. It's a ePTO, I believe they're calling them, right?
Yes, Jason. At launch, it will be an ePTO where our unit is designed to work with battery electric vehicles through a high voltage connection directly to the chassis batteries. However, we are also working on a solution to have our own independent battery pack so customers get the flexibility to put it either on a battery electric vehicle or on an internal combustion engine chassis. Because we have to remember that in the regulatory landscape, there are two different regulations. One is the ATCM, Airborne Toxic Control Measures, that goes into effect in 2023, and December 31st, 2023 is when the fleet will be counted for 15% transition to zero emissions on the reefers, on the straight trucks. And the other regulation is much later. It's in 2025, which says no engine or no emissions at all due to the operation of the reefer and the truck. So to service that gap, we are working on an independent battery pack solution as well to make sure our customers have that flexibility.
Yeah. California definitely throwing a lot of different curveballs at everyone, even here in the past month, with really aggressive legislation, which helps push the innovation as well. Going back to something you said earlier, you mentioned really working with the OEMs and getting different capabilities there. Can you give me an idea of, is this changing how you're working with OEMs? Is there a deeper integration with the truck manufacturers and Thermo King and how you bring this to the market and integrate these systems?
Absolutely, Jason. And we have to rethink the way we've been doing business before. Earlier in the diesel world, the interaction with the chassis maker was not much. All you did was connect the fuel lines, make sure you give your specifications for a good box, basically a good UA box that we need for reefer operation, and you're good. But now there is software involved everywhere, where you want to make sure our software interacts with the chassis battery software and make sure the diagnostics are all covered. So there is a lot of integration work, which obviously is motivating when you have good partners. And it is a true partnership where, in fact, you have to work hand in hand with OEMs if they are having their production level truck or their prototype trucks or what's going on there. And we have to be sure we are aligned there. Absolutely, yes.
Right. And the conversation around this class of truck in this space and the electrification too. I mean, when we were talking kind of Class 8 regional haul, range anxiety, and we see some of that in the medium duty space. But it's not just about range; it's about operational capacity, right? I mean, not only do you need the range, but you have to have the power then to power the reefer unit. And I mean, that is critical, right? Temperature control in those operations is critical. So being able to understand what that means and how it impacts the system, I think that's something we're all still figuring out too.
Yes, absolutely. And that is why Thermo King started with a ground up design, because we understand that range, we should have the least impact to the range of the battery electric truck during our reefer operation. So we started with a ground up design and made sure efficiencies at the core of our product. So there is very little impact to the customer. And operational behavior needs a lot of education in this space as well. So gone are the days where it's okay to keep your rear doors open for 45 minutes during loading or unloading. You have to be mindful and thoughtful about that, and that needs a big switch. And another example is door switches were an option where basically when you open the rear door of the vehicle, your unit has to shut off. And we had that as an option, but not anymore. It has to be a standard offering with our product with electrification, because when you open the rear door and your unit is still running, it's pretty much cooling the whole planet at that point, which is really bad.
Right. Well, yeah, and I mean, that is just another layer of transition that everyone has to make, even on electric vehicles and electric commercial vehicles, specifically again in that 7 and 8 range, which we've seen a lot of development in over the past couple of years. To your point, the way the drivers drive the trucks impacts the range there, right? So now to your point, the way the operators are going about the entirety of the work of the truck. I mean, that's amazing how much of an impact that has. As you talk with customers, right now, turning it kind of the customer angle, what are you hearing from them in terms of what they expect the reefer units to meet in terms of ESG goals or reduced emissions, and then do they have a plan for how they roll that out and train to their people?
Yes, it's going to be different segments when you think about bigger customers who have been thought leaders in the electrification space. They seem to have a very good understanding on how everything, the process should play out when it comes to electrification. And there is a thought leadership from the Thermo King end when it comes to certain other customers involving the regulatory piece and involving, hey, what is okay in the diesel world needs to be changed in the electric world. And this is what we have an electrification task force where our goal is to make sure customers and end users understand what is needed to be electrification ready in terms of commercial readiness, safety. That is huge for us because these are not 12 volts or 24 volts DC systems. These are all high voltage systems. So the skill set of the people should be there. To be able to handle these systems safely, PPE, and the charging infrastructure, what is needed in the bare minimum. So when an electric truck shows up, not hundreds of them, because that would be an entirely different scale we are talking. But in 2023, we are being very thoughtful on what to expect from our dealers as well, and what would qualify as electrification readiness.
Yeah, and I mean, to your point, you have the early adopters that really get their arms around it and go to figure it out, but then wider adoption and mass adoption you have to bring down to those mid-size and smaller fleets that might not have those resources, they get pulled into a lot of different directions. And even just talking here, one of the things that I know on electric trucks, like with the cooling systems, right? Even if it's full charge overnight, still plug it in because even though the batteries might not charge, it keeps the cooling system running, which keeps the batteries happy. So when you go and start it up in the morning, you have the range you expect as opposed to not plugging it in overnight, thinking you have 100%. You get up in the morning, it's cold. You got to turn the truck on, the batteries drop to 85 or 80% right because the cooling system has to kick up. I'm guessing maybe there's something similar here in the reefer world too. Of even if it, to your point, it's not diesel. You just can't leave it running. If it's on and you're
Yes.
charging, then you gotta plug in, and just those mindset shifts. That's really interesting.
Yep. So again, this is where the one word you'll hear from me over and over is efficiency, right? We've made sure that pull down is what we're talking about to make
Yep.
sure you can cool an ambient box to the set point that you need to haul lettuce or strawberries. That is typically happening at the depot before the truck leaves for the route. So the
Nice.
truck is anyway sitting there to charge the batteries for the route, and our unit can be running at the same time and cool the box while the truck is sitting there to get charged. And then there is the route where that's when our unit will be consuming from the chassis battery, and we've made sure the range impact is very minimal.
Right. Yes, yeah, super interesting even there, the explanation of where chargers are going to be needed and how that infrastructure impacts those really specific applications and duty cycles, right? Really interesting. Lots to talk about, I'm sure. Preeti, thanks so much for taking the time. It's been wonderful talking with you. I'm sure I'll talk to you again very soon.
Thank you very much. It was my pleasure.